Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order this special budget workshop session. And we will begin, if you will please stand and turn and join in a pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we begin, just a couple of pieces of information. The majority of today's meeting will be listening to a oral presentation by our city administrator along with a PowerPoint presentation. There will be an opportunity for public comment at the end of the proceedings, and there'll also be additional opportunities for public comment at the next city council meeting when we actually hold a public hearing on this matter. If you wish to address the council today, I would suggest you keep your comments fairly general and not, if you have specific questions about specific items or costs, I don't believe it would be fair to expect the staff to be able to respond to you immediately, but we will take notes, and that will be part of the follow-up presentation at the next public hearing.
Would it be appropriate if they have something specific to submit a
If
question
you
in
have
writing?
something specific in writing you want to submit at this time, or you can submit it in writing at a later date, your comments and concerns will be fully addressed. It just may not happen tonight. And then one final note, I'll also provide the council people with an opportunity to make comment or some general observations about what we were about to hear tonight. So with that, I will turn the meeting over to Michael McCatton, our city administrator.
Mayor, council, and community, tonight we are here for a workshop on the proposed budget for fiscal year 16-17. My position with regards to having my side to you is more in relationship to the screen, the microphone, and the computer. Normally I face the council, but this is probably better for a presentation. So I and staff are pleased to provide you the recommended fiscal year 16-17 annual budget, as well as the capital improvement program. This reflects our commitment to provide a high level of service to our residents, while at the same time preserving a long-term financial viability. As the city continues to manage through the economic downturn and the Great Recession, we are beginning to see positive signs in a slow economic recovery, and it shows steady improvement, and we'll go over that in some more detail. We have seen continued increases in sales tax revenue and TOT revenue this past year. However, it's important to note that we are just now getting to the revenue peaks that we witnessed in fiscal year 08-09, and expenditures, of course, have exceeded where we were in 08-09. A lot of that is due to budget increases that we face, include CalPERS retirement increases, healthcare cost increases, workers' comp and liability insurance. The council is aware that we're part of a risk management authority with a lot of cities in the central and southern San Joaquin Valley. For the most part, this budget is a hold-the-line budget, meaning there's not additional things that are part of this budget. What is additional, you will deliberate later. I will say that any budget comes with risk, and with risk in these historic economic times, that's just part of the game. But I'm confident that this recommended budget is responsible and a safe budget. In terms of budget principles and how we operate, we tend to maintain basic service levels at conservative levels. Revenues are estimated at realistic levels. Reserve policies afford protection against unanticipated shortfalls. Productivity improvements through technology and human resources are employed in all city services. One-time monies have not been used at this point in time for reoccurring expenditures. All applicable revenues have been computed consistent with provisions of Prop 218, meaning we don't have any, at this point in time, new rates. And I don't want to confuse rates with fees, and we'll talk about fees later on. The City of Angels Camp quality of life is maintained or enhanced through a broad mix of these services and paid for by its users, and these spending plans reflect our commitment to provide a high level of service to our community. As far as the budget approach, I tend to view it as collaborative. That process of blending of staff input, management buy-in, administrative support, and the last piece is the community process, and that's what we're starting tonight with the public review and council scrutiny. My staff may not agree with the collaborativeness this past fiscal year because we did have its challenges, but I would like to commend staff for their time and efforts because it was a very difficult budget to put together and to try to balance the best we could. With that, the recommended budget has some broad-based priorities. It includes fiscal management, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, community building, enhancing current services, preserving the natural environment, comprehensive planning, economic development, and leadership and image. You have council in your books, part of my budget message. I'll pull some highlights from that. But beginning in, for me, fiscal year 12-13, the council indicated that they would like additional information, but most importantly, timely information with regards to the budget. Since I've been on board, staff and with staff stability, we've provided quarterly budget reports. That is now our norm and our standard operating procedure. And those updates speak well to our fiscal health and ability to provide services to the community. The 1676 budget, wow, I guess I didn't catch that one. We're not that far ahead yet. Builds upon previous budget presentations so that the format and content provides the council a tool for making decisions. As part of the approach, departments undertook an analysis of the services they provide as it relates to cost. And these include and are presented as performance measures. Throughout the past, council has heard updates on our condition, whether it's through budget reports or the annual audit. You have heard that we are in a good financial situation, and that maintains to this day. The council has also heard about the needs of our aging infrastructure, and most importantly, the needs of water and wastewater, and those needs far exceed available resources. And often what is below the ground is what isn't recognized, and a lot of that cost is the piping system underground that we don't even see. Between the wastewater master plan, the water master plan, the council has heard the needs of those systems, and the budget does reflect taking on those needs. So again, whether it's through capital projects or financial planning, and a rate study that we're currently looking at, or continued grant submissions, the city will continue to be in a stronger position to protect our most precious resources now and in the future. The end of the recession does not necessarily mean recovery, but there is hope. Angels Camp economy and position as a destination will help lead to further recovery. In addition, we have a local government that is strongly involved and skilled at economic development, and I believe we have great business government relations. Angels Camp and our partners should continue to work together to create better economic tools, both for our recovery now but also for the future. Staff has mentioned earlier that we're optimistic about sales tax revenue and TOT. They have shown positive signs. Again, it's reflected in your budget. But for the year 16-17, even in a hold-the-line budget, the budget has a structural deficit of $111,000. The council and staff will have to continue to work on plugging that deficit in the future as the cost of doing business continues to climb faster than revenue via economic recovery that we've seen. And we must do so by weighing essential services versus community support programs. Because funding is still limited, this year's general fund budget expenditures include minimal capital outlay, and most of those are not part of the base budget, but are also part of the additional requests which will be presented at the end of this presentation. In terms of good news, major revenues have projected to increase by 2.6% from last year. However, in spite of the good news, it's not keeping up with all the other expenses that the city faces. But with that said, I still believe that this budget is a cautiously optimistic outlook as well as a safe budget. On rates and user fees, the budget for now has no increases for water and wastewater rates. However, we are in the process of doing a comprehensive water and wastewater rate study. It's an important first step on our short-term and long-range future for our enterprise systems. It's important to note that any rate must take into account the needs of the infrastructure, the needs related to growth, our cost to operate, the needs of the state, which seem to fluctuate and change all the time, and ultimately the ratepayer and the burden it places on them. And in addition, it has to face the reality of the drought and the continued drought and the viability of Utica Water and Power to provide water now and in the future. The city also evaluates user charge systems or user fees to ensure that we are assessing appropriate fees for the services we provide. For 16-17, there are several proposed fee increases and additions that are recommended within the base budget. And those will be presented mostly at the public hearing in a separate format because it requires a resolution, but I'll touch on some of those through the report. And staff is also still working on the impact fees for water and wastewater. As council is aware, we updated impact fees for police, fire, parks, and streets, and water and wastewater is next on the list. We also have a budget that has quite a bit of cost allocation or internal service funds or transfers, which move from department to department, depending on where the work is actually placed. Some of this is on a formula or on a percent of time. It includes materials and supplies, and you'll see that in the general fund, water fund, wastewater fund, the lighting landscape district and capital projects. You'll see those transfers moving in and out. And you also see later in the presentation a separate presentation just on the allocation program as it relates to general fund services. The purpose is to track this, and we spend a lot of time with our timesheets truing up where we're at, and this is adjusted as we move throughout the fiscal year. So when you see the heading of transfers in and out, this is usually what it's related to. Now the small print. The general fund is the main operating fund. It's also the least restrictive. The general fund is still very healthy. If you were to take the audited general fund balance for assigned and unassigned funds for last fiscal year, it was just over $1.04 million, and that includes an unallocated fund balance of $893,000. I already mentioned that this budget has a $111,000 operating loss. This would bring our unallocated fund balance to $781,000. However, when you add the pending relinquishment funds of $291,000, as well as the post-employment reserve, our assigned and unassigned fund balance actually increases from 1.04 million to 1.22 million. Council should also be aware that we continue to pay for retirees on a pay-as-you-go basis, but we're also embarking on our review of the OPEB obligation, and that'll be presented to the council in the near future on how best to fund that moving forward. But with that in mind, we need to take into account that the employees are funded through the water fund and wastewater fund and not just general fund. So the distribution for that obligation would have to be distributed. While it's not written in a policy, recommendations are that you maintain a general fund cash reserve between 20 to 25% of your revenue, operating revenue. For us, that means we need to be somewhere above the $500,000 mark. And this budget, we are safely above that mark, and that is with the base budget as you see tonight. I've already mentioned that this budget is a hold-the-line budget, and it does have a $111,000 operating loss. If we are to maintain a balanced budget while providing community support, I believe we need to work collectively on fixing this deficit. This includes looking at a potential sales tax or other tax measures. Those are included as an additional request to begin the planning of that venture, because it takes some advanced planning and marketing to even look at that. And then at the end of the presentation, as I mentioned, you have a number of additional requests. I've prioritized those based on several factors, including service delivery, efficiencies, operating costs, succession planning, so on and so forth. And the capital replacement are listed as the actual cost. The council will note that we've done several lease purchases over time, so we have the ability to look at some of these items through a lease purchase as opposed to strictly outright purchasing them. Again, the wastewater fund and water fund remain somewhat healthy, but that's sort of misleading since wastewater, there exists 11.3 million in short-term and long-term capital needs, or water, I'm sorry, has 11.3 in needs. No, I was right, 11.3 for wastewater, and our fund balance is 1.7 million, and the water master plan has 24.3 million in needs and a $6 million fund balance. Again, it's not written in a policy, but we should maintain 6 months of operating capital. We are in a healthy position by all intent and purposes with regards to those funds. If we were to go for a bond, our rating should be a fairly decent rating. If we were to go to bond some of those capital need projects that have been identified. I've already talked about the rate study and the fact that we're embarking on that, and the impact fee study. That doesn't really fix the long-term needs, but it does help fix those long-term capital needs. In terms of capital needs, we have over 2.95 million in designated capital projects as part of our capital plan. A lot of this is carryover from previous fiscal years. In bold are new projects for this fiscal year. It includes plan study review for 49 Angel Oaks and Foundry Lane area, road rehabilitation project, and a project where we're relocating the line at the Union Congregation Church. There's a sewer line that needs to be relocated for due to some construction needs they have. Impact fees are considered to be charged on new development to help fund and pay for construction as we grow. These fees are implemented to help reduce and mitigate the burden on the local jurisdiction that's already here, so that as we deal with growth, there's money for that. I've already highlighted the fact that we already looked at police, fire, parks, and streets, and those were increased this last year based on a new study that was done. And you're going to see that when you look in your budget, you'll see these as standalone funds as part of the budget. Again, this budget is a hold-the-line budget. We're trying to maintain our performance measures and maintain the level of service for our residents, and that service is what they've come to expect. There's very little change as you go through the budget from one fiscal year to the next. You will see in personnel some changes. Those are related to personnel increases, whether it's merit or promotions. I will note that 70% of our workforce is currently at the top step with regards to their MOU or at-will agreements. The budget reflects minimum wage changes and paid sick for part-time employees that were approved last year. We've had increases in our pension, health benefit, workers' comp, and liability. All total, these increases equate to a 3% increase over last fiscal year. And again, our revenues only increased by about 2.6%, so there's the difference, or a large part of the difference. Council will note that we've had discussions before on performance measures. We are in the midst of updating our city website, so I don't want to talk too much about these because once the website's up to date, we're going to work on graphically depicting these performance measures and how we're providing service and how successful we are, and that'll be an integral part of the new website once it's developed. Beginning in fiscal year 12-13, master fees were approved by resolution, and that schedule hasn't really changed except for the museum. There are several fees for service that we have reviewed and some recommendations that we're making for you. And again, we'll have more detail as to those fees and the impacts they have at the public hearing. Staff believes that the council should be aware of what these fees are and what the actual cost is for us to provide this as it relates to actual service. So we want to have council have a good handle of some of the subsidies, if you will, that we provide the community that really aren't core services or have become, or better said, have become expected to be core services by the city. There are 37 additional budget requests. I've highlighted those that I feel are the most important for the community in terms of service delivery. Again, I think it's important to mention that this needs to be taken in concert with community support and the funding we do for them. And I mentioned a tax consultant is one of the items that we're requesting as an additional request to look at the feasibility of a sales tax measure, if you will, or another type of user fee that would help create a more sustainable budget base for us and reduce that structural deficit. If all the additional requests were funded, the fund balances that you're presented would be reduced by the amounts that you see on the screen. So if we approved all the general fund requests, it would reduce by close to another $300,000, road funds by $100,000, water by $91,000, and wastewater by $77,000. This really isn't the conclusion. I bet a lot of people wish it was. But this is the conclusion of the executive summary section that you have in the budget. And while economic recovery in California is occurring, it's uneven and it varies by region throughout the state. I am seeing trends that shows that we have managed through the worst of the recession. We've seen the advent of new housing development, and retailers are beginning to inquire about Angels Camp as a potential destination. Those are all positive signs. In terms of what to do this fiscal year, it's a lot of what I said last year. We need to roll up our sleeves and take a look at some of these items. We need to take a look at city-owned properties and consider selling them or consolidating them. That's not something that happens overnight, but it's discussions that we need to continue to have. We need to take a look at fees for service and how it relates to service delivery and how much is being subsidized. We should continue to partner with Destination Angels Camp, the Angels Camp Business Association, the Visitors Bureau in marketing economic strategies that bring sustainable change to our community. We should explore potential tax measures, and to that end, every one of us should be willing and ready to roll up our sleeves and get ready to come to the table to help maintain the city as a great place to live, work, and play. I'll go on the next slide because that's kind of redundant. So in terms of the process, you're going to have a presentation on the budget or your binder that you have tonight. Upon completion of that, we would want to set the public hearing. Again, the budget that's presented is, for all intents and purposes, a status quo budget. And I want to thank the council for the guidance and support, and I want to thank the management team for all their help in producing this budget for you. I believe it's something that we are all proud of, and I recommend approval as presented. So, as far as that presentation. So the first page in your document, page 1, this reflects the ending fund balances and the beginning fund balances of the major funds that you're considering tonight. If the budget was approved as presented, what you see on the screen is what the ending fund balances would be for the major funds. This next section is revenue by fund. You'll note an increase from last year to this year. That's mainly attributed to transportation impacts and projects through COG and other sources. The general fund indicates an overall 23.6 increase. And while finance and administration is only indicating a 2.6% increase, that's the major fund sources that include sales tax, TOT, and property tax, where you're getting the 23.6% comes from the pending relinquishment funds totaling $291,000. So that kind of tips just the scale and overall general fund revenue. The water fund indicates a 2.6% decrease due to water reduction savings, and the wastewater fund has almost a 1% increase. This is a summary of revenue sources. It's just information only so that council has a decent idea where their revenue sources are, whether it's tax base, fees, permits, or licenses, sales of product, which is through the museum, service-related, outside agency funding, or other. And the outside agency, most of that would be through COG or the state. Next page is a summary of operating expenses. This excludes major capital projects. All total operating expenses are over $7 million. This is about a 1% increase from last fiscal year. Much of this has already been discussed under the executive summary with regards to personnel expenses, and there are no new positions reflected in the proposed budget. This section reflects the area of responsibility, if you will. And it has a comparison for you of last fiscal year to this fiscal year, how the city budgets against the general fund, road funds, LLD, the water fund, the wastewater fund, and Greenhorn Creek, which is not the LLD, so I don't want to confuse the two. I've already talked about the capital projects in some detail. What you see is on this section is the 2.96 million in projects, but it also tells you a little bit more detail, whether it's engineering, design, what's really going to be performed, whether it's new, ongoing. Again, capital projects never fit neatly in one fiscal year. They often bridge several fiscal years, especially some of the larger capital projects. This is our debt schedule. Council will note that we have 2 payments remaining to the Veterans Memorial District, which was for Tryon Park expansion. And also of note is the 2001 revenue bond has now been paid in full, so that helped some of the operating loss that the wastewater fund was experiencing by $281,000 each year. This section just summarizes the cost allocation amongst the various funds. And this section is a summary that provides a little bit more detail with regards to the cost allocation plan and from a budget standpoint where we're starting from. Again, this is adjusted as we turn in our timesheets throughout the year based on the capital projects and where they're at in the queue or how far along we are. So there might be some change on that, but that, at least from a budget standpoint, is our starting point. And if we hit all targets, that would be our ending point as well. I've already talked about the operating loss in the general fund, which is on page 9. The budget at this time does not include many community support items. So while the budget is safe, it isn't sustainable. You'll note that due to the relinquishment funds totaling $291,000, the projected ending fund balance actually improves over last fiscal year. This would give the council some flexibility in considering community support items as well as road maintenance projects over the next couple of years. So now we're going to start looking at each department and a little bit more detail on fund. I'm not going to go into the detail on step increases, MOU changes, PERS increases. I've already touched base on what those are. So when you see adjustments in personnel costs, it's either because of the cost allocation plan or it's because of increases in the things I've already outlined. The first department to discuss is actually the City Council. You'll note that under consultant services, it's a little bit lower than last year. We're finding some better ways and better alternatives in providing that service. I don't know that we were so successful tonight, but we're working on it. And you'll also note that we've already saved $6,000 this year since we don't need an election. Also of note, I've eliminated all training from the budget unless it's mandated or unless it could provide a cost savings alternative as opposed to contracting it out. So at this point in time, there is no money in the budget for training for City Council, but you can deliberate the savings of $6,000 in the election and decide if you want to move some of that training for new council members. The next part of the budget is the city attorney. This reflects contract rates. This is his base level service, and it doesn't include anything that becomes litigation related. And the city attorney, like the council, is spread amongst the general fund, water fund, and wastewater fund equally. And even though we suspect that he's going to spend a lot of time on impact fees and rates for water and wastewater this year, we left it as an equal spread through water, wastewater, and the general fund. The next department is city engineering, and it is a general fund department, but it uses such a wide variety of funds that there's very little actual general fund money in the engineering department. I mentioned training, where we can see some savings, and there is some training that we identified that would actually help incur savings from items that are currently being outsourced. And if you have some specific questions on that, I would note that the city engineer had a planned event today, so couldn't be with us, but it had to do with his computer system, and Dave Hannum, you might be aware of it. The CAD program? Yeah, thank you. I couldn't remember the name. Next is finance and general administration. This shows up as the home for much of our general fund revenue. Council will note that this budget reflects the end of the triple flip, so we don't have to try to explain that anymore, which is great. So it makes it a lot easier to take a look at sales tax and property tax and TOT tax. But the problem is you don't have a good comparison to last year, because last year triple flip was still in effect. But moving forward, it's going to be a lot easier for councils and administrators to understand and explain. The finance and general administration is really kind of two departments, finance and administrative services. Some of the increases, you'll note that we've done the proper coding of water utilized by Greenhorn Creek from the creek, and put that service charge under as part of finance and general administration. This water is not a processed water item, so it doesn't belong under the water fund. You'll note that we have consultants under professional services for the OPEB obligation study, as well as outside consultants for transit occupancy tax and sales tax audits. And the capital outlay that we have is either for phone system upgrades, which are sorely needed, and will ultimately lead to a decrease in operating costs from what we currently have. And we're in the middle of the website update, and we also need updates on the server room. Community support indicates the revenue increases previously discussed. I don't know what the dash A is for TOT. I looked through this 3 times today, so I got blurry-eyed, so I apologize for the typo. But the only thing that is shown there is the Visitors Bureau support for tourism, which is part of the TOT increment that was approved several years ago. The base budget does not include funding for ACPA, Angels Camp Commemorative Committee events, and Destination Angels Camp support. In terms of building and planning, things are really starting to turn the corner in that department in terms of activity. We're really seeing what's, an uptick, for lack of a better term, in terms of building permits. Yes, part of that's de novo homes, but we've seen more than just de novo homes. We've seen other homes in Greenhorn Creek, new homes in Greenhorn Creek other than just de novo come to fruition, and we've had several commercial developments that are very, very strong inquiries that we should see this year. And that's about all we can say at this point in time, because we just don't have enough information to elaborate much further. In terms of professional services, surveying services is kind of moved from engineering to planning. You'll see that as a change from last fiscal year. It's more of the actual home, but that's going to be offset by revenue when and if that's needed. And the same thing applies to environmental review services. If we have to contract that out in order to fast track something, or if something's needed in particular, we would contract that out, and then that's repaid by the applicant. So that would be offset by revenue. In terms of the museum, the base budget reflects similar revenue to last year. That's not a knock on this year because we had increased fees, and so we've identified what those fees are, and we are seeing quite a bit of more traffic than we did last year. It's hard to really gauge the effects of the Butte Fire and what it had on the museum last year, so we felt comfortable leaving revenue where it was and just kind of playing out to see what happens. Council will see some changes in the various departments with regards to electricity. That comes directly from CPPA and the incremental increases that they identified we would be seeing for our facilities. So you'll see that in various budgets. The museum does have a capital needs request. However, for now, it's as an additional request. It's mostly for labor as it relates to faulty building material. And it's something that the city attorney's been working on for us and in concert with us. You'll note that revenues have increased greatly this fiscal year for the fire department. This is 100% credit to the fire chief, his staff, and the council in the purchase of a Type 3 engine. How many weeks now has that been out, Chief?
We've been out for at least 6.5 weeks.
So it's been a busy fire season already. We do have in the budget strike team wages, but that's offset by reimbursements. And again, the fire season isn't over yet. But for a large part, the fire department is operating on just essentials only. There's no real additional request with this budget. With the police budget, you'll see transfers in from supplemental law enforcement grant, also from the Office of Traffic Safety grant for additional DUI activity. I think I'm correct that this is the last of the OTS grant revenue, and it's the end of the funding cycle. You'll see the increases in electricity that I identified. Under professional services, we contract with the county for dispatch, so any increases that you see there are contractual related. And you also see the upgrade needs for phone system that PD has, as well as every other department. In terms of Public Works Department, the budget reflects revenue, and we've already identified that we are going to be in discussions with the CVB regarding rental. We've looked at park rental facilities and the costs related to providing picnic shelters and that type of service. And staff is also proposing rental fees for hanging street banners and parade road closures. And again, when we say fees, it's actually to recover the cost for those services. Right now, there's 6 to 7 different parades a year, and we just do those as part of our city service. But that isn't the core service of Public Works, and we need to make some decisions with regards to those items. The training budget reflects mandatory training that department has. It includes backflow testing, but it's not limited to just backflow testing. Beginning on page 35 is the water department. It reflects changes in water improvements and replacements. The revenue reflects all user services. You'll note that the revenue is a little less than previous years, and that speaks to the reduction efforts that this community's had. We've done better than what the state mandated every time, but that does come at a cost. And it also reflects the additional UWPA contribution as it relates to the drought, as well as our participation with the IRWMPA. And if you want to know what that is, I would turn to Councilmember Sobon, but
Integrated Regional Water Management.
thank you. Public authority.
Yes.
In terms of capital improvements, we have the continuation of the impact fee, as well as our contract and capital needs to provide water through UWPA, and design improvements at the water treatment plant. Right now, it's just the design portion. In terms of capital replacement, we are looking at Murphy's Grade Road, water rate study, Bragg Street replacement line, and the water meter replacement. And water meter replacement is older dilapidated meters throughout the city so that we get better, more factual and actual meter reads. The council would note that the Murphy's Grade Road project is a road project, but we're also looking at it from the standpoint of water and wastewater, because those improvements are also needed there as well. So the last thing we want to do is improve a section of road in the city and then come back in and tear up that paving to improve the water line and the wastewater line. So we're doing that in concert with each other. Beginning on page 45 is the wastewater fund. Again, it gives you comparison of the fund balance from year to year. I've already mentioned the bond issuance payment is over, at least for the 2001 bond. There's no major changes in the operating budget, with lone exception being the need to update some of our permitting. In terms of wastewater capital improvements, you have the impact fees for wastewater and the aerated digesters, which is close to being finished. In terms of wastewater debt, you have the State Water Resources Control Board, and this is a duplicate slide because we already talked about the payment of the bond and how that's helped us moving forward. In terms of capital replacement, we have the water interfund loan to the LOD, and that's a payment back to the LOD, and that's for the conversion of the landscape lighting district Median Island to tertiary water. I already mentioned Murphy's Grade Road and those improvements. We are upgrading the SCADA system. We are in the middle of the wastewater fee study. We're looking at replacing the sewer line at the Union Congregational Church, and we're looking at the North Baker and Bush Street sewer main replacement. In terms of other funds, you have a whole slew of pages that talk about other funds, and it's just simply for tracking purposes. I'll touch on some of the more major ones. I'm not going to go into all the detail of everything that you see on the screen, but page 55 gives you the summary of those funds because they are kind of the home department for those funds. So some of the highlights: transportation projects. You have the Downtown Corridor Planning Project. You have Local Collector Road Project, which is safety striping and signs. The Angels Creek Trail, the Gateway Corridor Project, and again, Murphy's Grade Road. Under the gas tax fund, this usually comes to us from the League of Cities fiscal analyst, so we're pretty certain as to that revenue. But based on budget this year, that will have a reserve, if you will, or fund balance of $67,000 at the end of this budget year. You'll see quite a bit of movement on transportation impact fees. A lot of that, or all of that, is developer-driven, whether it be through de novo homes and the number of homes that they're going to build this year, or commercial development that we know that's in the queue. We see quite a bit of change occurring with impact fees for transportation. The Utica Water and Power Authority Fund just gives you an idea how the money's moving in and out to cover the drought expense, if you will, for lack of a better term, that we're facing from the operating costs that UWPA has due to the continued drought and their loss of revenue from power generation. So you'll see the budget gap and how that money's moved in to cover that transfer. The landscape lighting district budget's also is part of this. We are set to receive proposals for tomorrow is the deadline for the wetland mitigation construction project. So I'll have a little bit better idea on how that's going to affect the budget or if it will affect it at all. We feel pretty confident in the engineer's estimate. But the council and staff and the public will note that the LOD is embarking on two major projects. Again, that's wetland restoration and the conversion to tertiary water on the Median Islands. We do have a number of additional requests for the council's consideration. These are in light of the structural deficit in the general fund. Again, I highlighted and prioritized items. There are a number of capital projects and programs which don't have an effect on the general fund but would enhance and improve performance outcomes, so some of those have been highlighted. Again, I really feel that we need to figure out ways of growing out of this deficit, and that is through economic development. Therefore, the community support and how we fund that can help that deficit through development, job creation, job retention, tourism. So how we fund community support can actually help us grow out of it. It's just a tough decision for the council to make. And then any other requests that are on there, I would suggest that we hold in abeyance until mid-year review, or unless we find additional funding sources or grant opportunities. The back of your binder is a section on the organization chart. You'll note that we have 34 full-time employees, 34 part-time seasonal or volunteers. And then you also note the combined salary schedule. This reflects current negotiated and improved MOU agreements or at-will agreements at this point in time. So I don't want to repeat what I've already said about getting through the Great Recession, but I do want to thank the council for their guidance and support, and the management team and staff for bringing this item to you. It's through the employees' dedication, creativity, and sacrifice that this budget is a reality, and I think it's something that we are all proud of. In terms of moving forward, we need to continue to look for better ways to operate. Again, we need to look at our properties and make some decisions about consolidation. We're going to have a look at fees for service. We need to continue to partner with Destination Angels Camp the Angels Camp Business Association, the Visitors Bureau, in helping us grow out of this structural deficit. I believe strongly in exploring a potential tax measure to help stabilize our ever-changing economy. And to that end, the council and staff and our partners should be prepared to roll up our sleeves to help sustain Angels Camp as a great place to live, work, and play. And the budget you have before you is what I recommend. This is simply a presentation. After the budget, I'll ask council to schedule a public hearing. That doesn't change the fact that we'll have a public hearing after this meeting or public discussion after this meeting with regards to questions. I suggest September 6th if that works for everyone. If not, we can look at some other dates. And with that, that pretty much closes my presentation. So absent that, I'm here to answer any questions, or we can turn it over to the community for any input they have.
Well, while you're at the podium, first of all, is there any general comments or questions from Mr. McCatton by the council?
I've got some number type questions. First of all, the sales tax increase you show, is that part of the triple flip, that increase, the 35%?
Yeah.
That's, okay,
If you look, property tax goes down.
okay.
Yeah.
And then we see impact fees to general fund, the 282,000. I know largely that's that De Novo home subdivision. Do you know about how many units you're budgeting selling in that time?
5, 10?
There's a little more than that, we're probably saying about, it could be 7 to 10. Well, in our budget, we say mostly 11 houses, so De Novo plus the rest of the community is included in all that.
Okay. So about 20,000 a house kind of thing?
Well, a large chunk of that is commercial and retail as well, that's in the queue.
Okay, I was just curious. Okay, and then why was there a big drop, $70,000 drop in Office of Traffic Safety revenues?
It's grant funds. So
Okay.
the grant funds are running out, so
Okay,
that's for the DUI program, so we're spending the rest of the funds this year, and we haven't applied for another cycle of funds at this time.
okay. And then TOT and sales tax audits, I know we ordered them last year, quite some time ago. Are they still not paid for? We're pushing that cost into next year, or what are we doing there?
Yes and yes. It was a last year equation, and it's a carryover into this year. So whatever was done last year was paid for, but they're also working into the next fiscal year to make sure.
When will that be wrapped up, and when will we have some results?
TOT audits they're in the process of doing TOT now.
Yes, they have one automated review to do in September, so probably October will be the final report to come.
Okay. And then the Public Works fee increase you're talking about, the hanging the banners for the 6 or 7 parades. Who does that affect? I mean, it looks like it's a $60,000 or $70,000 hit or increase in the revenue side. Is that what that reflects?
It's far from, no, it's nowhere close to 60 or 70,000 in revenue.
I thought the Public Works fee or the increase in revenues was up there. I'd have to find that.
It's probably related to a lot of other things than just that item. I think all totaled for Public Works, it might be $10,000 in revenue between banners, park facilities, and parades.
So what was the other Public Works increase in revenue due to? So I thought it was sizable. I have it in my notes, but I don't have a page.
We show revenue coming in for new development for the water meters themselves. It's one of the new fees we're going to be proposing on the master fee schedule, because right now the cost of the actual meter isn't covered anyway. So there's like $11,000 in the budget for the new meters, plus there's about,
Is that a general fund? That'd be water fund, right?
it is, through the transfers, it moves over to the water fund. But when you're looking at the Public Works budget, it's in total, no matter what they do. And so when you're looking at the gross revenue item number, it has that in there. But through the transfers, it moves over to water.
Okay, I can't find it right now.
Maybe these
It's page.
specific
31.
questions will be better to pass them forward to staff and have them addressed
Right.
prior to the public hearing?
In writing.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Okay. I only have one more question.
Go ahead.
It's allocation of the TOT road fund. They're allocated so that we're spending engineering and admin and money and all that kind of stuff. So when we get our money in, it goes right out and nothing goes to the roads. So are we over allocating the amount of time spent on that, especially in years where we're not doing anything in roads?
Is that a question or a statement?
It's a question I'm asking, well, I guess I'm asking, how do we justify allocating the road funds to a point where we're taking the money and going into admin?
Well, you'll know where it's going, and it's going to support the road system. So staff's efforts on COG projects, the money has to come somewhere for staff's time related to those projects. So the TOT roads money is the funding source for staff to provide that service. It's either TOT road money or it's pure general fund money. It doesn't matter. It's the same net effect.
Okay, so if we need money for roads, we have to find it elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You do have reserves, though, in both gas tax and TOT at the end of this fiscal year, and then as well as the relinquishment funds that we're getting.
Any other council questions or comments while Mr. McHatton's at that podium?
I have none.
Okay, if not, at what point do we want to get consensus at the date of the public hearing? You want to do that now?
Sure, let's get that over with.
Do you require a motion and a vote?
Yes.
Okay, so it's been suggested that we set September 6th as the date for the budget public hearing. Does that work for everybody? If so,
Before we make that decision, what is expected either on our part or from Michael between now and then that would affect that date? He's ready apparently unless we got questions, right?
well, I would hope that between now and the public hearing, that each of the council people prepare detailed questions and submit them in email form to the city so that they can be addressed as part of the public hearing process. I've made notes throughout my budget binder, and, it's not appropriate to go into them now, but I do want to fully understand it. So I say between now and the public hearing, we convey that information to Michael.
Then we need to give him time to respond.
Yes.
You
When he
are-
responds, he would respond to everybody as a group.
That's fine, but I'm saying we should have our written questions to him enough time before the 6th that he
Absolutely.
has time to,
Sure, the earlier the better.
Yeah, it's only 5 days, just so you know. Monday is a holiday.
3 work days.
3 work days, and it's a public hearing. So I don't know if there's any rush, but I don't know what Michael feels.
Well, given that,
I don't know the
Exactly.
level of detail
That's right.
or how many questions you have. If it's like the past, we should be able to handle that between now and Tuesday. But if it's increased beyond that, then it might be difficult.
okay.
I think if the questions are of a nature that are clarification, that wouldn't be a problem. But if we're gonna suggest that we restructure things somehow, then that would take a heck of a lot more time to prepare.
Well, I think anything restructure should be done as part of the public hearing.
That could come from the public
And
hearing.
that would come from the public hearing and your analysis of the budget and deliberation of the budget. The questions are just clarifying of nature at this point in time. It should only be, why did we budget this and how these funds move from one thing to the other?
If that's what we're doing.
Anything with regards to a deliberation item, should we be doing this versus this?
Yeah.
That's for the council at the public hearing
Yeah, that's what.
and not a question of staff.
So September 6th work for
My
everybody?
only concern is getting it in the newspaper. I do have to put an ad in the newspaper, and as of
Well-
12 today, I cannot put it in the Calaveras Enterprise. It would
Okay.
have to go in on Friday, and then it would be, which is fine, that's, I gives you
Does the
3
Labor
days.
Day holiday complicate things?
Well, they have a paper Tuesday, so it just,
Well,
it will get, I
You know,
mean, I
let's-
think it will go.
I don't think
Friday.
there's a reason to rush it. If you want to
You
put it
could-
off till the second meeting in September?
I would prefer having a special meeting, maybe the second Tuesday in September,
Oh, between the two councils?
between the two meetings, as opposed to continue to push this off. We are,
Yeah.
So that'd be the 13th?
Because if we make any decisions and we want him to change, then we're looking at pushing it into the 1st of October, which isn't fair to them or us to make all decisions that need to, especially with Gold Rush coming up. I think we have a couple other things that are happening, so I'd rather support getting it,
Yeah.
getting as much as we can next Tuesday, and then if we have to, host a special meeting the following, and then that way we can meet.
Yeah. I thought the budget was put together really well. It's pretty clear. I had a few clarifying questions, and I'm ready to discuss it. I think I have a good handle on it. And I think that the 6th is appropriate. I haven't heard any reason really, other than, well, I really haven't heard any good reasons to postpone anything.
Although I have a lot of notes that really don't translate into questions I don't already know the answer to. So
Right.
I wouldn't be scared off by my earlier comment.
My only concern is getting it in the newspaper, because I cannot get it in until Tuesday. I will try to get Fridays. The cutoff date was today at noon, so if they can fit this in, that's fine. But, I mean, I would go for Tuesday, the 6th, but just, there's that little bit, so you guys know. That the cutoff date for the newspaper was noon today, to get an ad in.
Okay.
But they like me, so I might be able to.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm good with either day. Should we try that
The
as our
6th, I'll
first?
try the 6th, I think. try
I
that
think
first.
we
If there's a
should go for
problem.
the 6th, and then if Mary is not successful in getting it, then we have a special meeting.
Okay.
today was a slow news day.
The Willow fire is out.
Okay, is someone ready to make a motion to that effect?
I'll move that we set the public hearing for the next city council meeting, September 6th, unless Mary is unable to get the required public notifications in the paper.
I'll second that.
Okay. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I won't repeat the motion. Bert said it very eloquently. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that carries.
Aye.
Aye, that carries unanimously.
Mayor, also of note, I do have on the screen the additional request list. So if there's any questions about any items that I didn't go over in the budget, we could look at those items as well.
Okay.
So if you have any clarifications.
At this time?
Sure.
Well, I only have a comment that I would ask that the city attorney look into whether it's appropriate or not. And that deals with the special request number 7, being replacing, I guess it's 7 and 8, replacing the staircase between the downtown parking lot and Main Street. And my thought here is, we know that we have a special set-aside fund for TOT roads to help support our transportation system, mainly our streets throughout the city. But in my opinion, those public transportation systems should also include public parking lots and the access points to and from those parking lots. And so if we get a favorable recommendation from our city attorney that the TOT road funds are eligible for that activity, I would like to see the expense moved out of the general fund category into the second one, which is called the road funds. So that's just merely a suggestion. And that would make it easier to fund if it could be.
Yeah, and we know at the very least that relinquishment funds would be an eligible use, and those are kind of a catch-all under road funds. But we will ask with the specific question on TOT roads and gas tax and whether or not that would be an eligible use.
Okay. And then, again, a general comment. This is the first year that I've seen this category of grouping our whole series of road-related funds, like you have illustrated there, where you have the TOT roads, you have gas tax, road relinquishment. I know in years past, road relinquishment revenues that have come in have lost their identity, and they just got lost in the general fund, and either are still sitting there as part of that reserve or may have gotten spent. I think it's important that these funds keep their identity as road transportation-related funds, and maybe they're not set aside exclusively for that purpose, but that they don't get lost, so as to future councils deal with the budgets, that next year they'll, whatever road relinquishment money is not spent this year keeps a line item, and it shows up as a beginning balance.
And you'll note that that is showing up as a new fund. this
That's
year.
right, that's right. I think that's smart, and if it takes, formal council policy to do that, I would urge us to do that. If that can be understood by just our discussion here tonight, that would be fine too. Anyway, that's my feeling on that.
Good idea.
I have no other questions of the what it's called additional budget request. Is there anybody else in the council that has a
I
question?
have one question. I might as well ask it, huh?
Sure.
About the, wait a minute. Find it. The question I had was on the OPEB reserve. The 148,916, is that an addition, is that a reserve that's been set aside that includes the pre-funding, the 275,769? Is that an addition?
To kind of make it a little bit more clear, the council set aside, past council set aside $275,000. And it was recognized as such under the general fund. But it came with the stipulation that it would be split amongst the water fund and wastewater fund. So that was split out last year. So the 148 that you see is general fund, but there is a portion that's water, there is a portion that's wastewater now.
Okay.
So, but it still totals
But
275,000.
It still totals.
Yes, it still totals 275,
Okay.
but
So
only,
there's not, that's not actually an additional.
no, it's only,
Okay.
that's only the general
So
fund
we haven't
portion.
set up a reserve yet, actually. We have to talk about that.
Yeah, that is the only reserve at this point in time for the general fund.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
One more question?
One question. With the gazebo at Utica Park, and it kind of fits the stairwell too, what kind of liability do we have because of the condition of those?
That's an item that I'm actually going to have a discussion with staff to see if we're better served looking at removal as opposed to replacement, and analyzing how much it gets used. It's the smaller gazebo, not the large picnic shelter. And it probably has more termites than wood. So it is a liability, but there are cheaper alternatives for shade structures now than rebuilding old wood gazebos, so we need to look at that.
So I would suggest anything that's an actual liability should be highlighted,
Yeah.
I would think.
I guess I should highlight the roof then. Watch for falling shingles.
Okay, I think it's appropriate at this time to open up the meeting for public comment. Again, the public will have another opportunity at the actual public hearing, but is there anybody that wants to address the council at this time? I would only ask that keep your comments as general as possible. Specific numerical questions may be difficult to answer without some research. So, Anybody want to address the council, please come to the podium. Okay. Seeing none. I don't know, just, I'd like to make one more closing comment, and it pretty much paraphrases Michael's message. We've been dealing with a structural deficit for every year that I've been on the council, and it doesn't seem to go away, and it just keeps becoming more and more threatening. I think Michael has done a good job since he's been here, and as he refers to it as truing up the real costs of the various departments and assigning them properly to where the responsibility should lie through the cost allocation system. Also, the TOT road funds and the emergency service funds are getting used to their maximum. It is my feeling that probably when the ballot initiative was passed to collect these additional TOT funds, the public had some expectation that these additional revenues were going to support additional services in some way, that the maintenance costs of roads and emergency services in the fire department would somehow continue to be covered by what was being budgeted. But I think what's happening over the years, as costs are going up, these new TOT monies are being forced to be used to cover previous ongoing expenses, and we're not getting the true bang for the buck. There's no way to fix that. That's just the reality, which leads to Michael's point earlier that it's imperative that we have some new revenue source. The new council is going to be faced with tougher problems in the years forward to continue to cover these costs with the existing revenues. Police and fire, public safety costs go up every year, and a lot of that is out of our control because of PERS requirements, insurance requirements, and there's no way to cover those costs except through the general fund. So I would urge everybody to really think seriously about what we can do to. We can't control the expenditure side as much as we can control the revenue side. That's all I have to say. So, any other comments? If not, we'll adjourn.
Just so I know, anyone has questions, they're going to send them in to Michael? Or?
Yes. Amongst the 5 council people, if we can get our questions to Michael in writing as soon as possible. Any member of the public that wishes to do the same, please do so. And then at the public hearing, sometime during the presentation, they can be addressed.
I would ask the council if they could CC the question to Julie
Sure.
in order for us to timely get this. If I'm at a meeting or out of the office for a couple hours, it's a couple hours she's not answering.
Okay.
So if you could CC her on that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, we're not looking for a written response back. I'm going to present my comments in the vein of subject matter for the public hearing, being prepared to address them at that point, as opposed to a response to my email.
What we've done in the past is take your questions and present them at the public hearing, that this was asked by the council and this is the answer.
Okay, that's what we did, I think, last year.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you all for attending, and we will adjourn.